The Price of Truth, Part 1. The Emerald Dress, Stop Everything and Listen Up. Have you ever wondered what you'd do if you discovered your partner's betrayal was not just an affair, but a carefully planned public humiliation? If this story makes your blood boil, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We need your energy for this one. And tell us right now, what's the most shocking way you can imagine discovering infidelity? Leave a comment. The hook, the receipt, and the revelation. Some women discover infidelity through forgotten text messages on a cell phone, others by a strange perfume on a shirt. Serafina. Sarah Thorne discovered it through a mundane restaurant receipt tucked into the pocket of her husband's custom-tailored suit. A receipt for 2 people on the very day he claimed he was working late on the new Brazil expansion deal. But what truly destroyed her wasn't finding out that Alexander Vance had a mistress. It was the crushing realization that the mistress was the exact age of their daughter when the affair began, 5 years ago, and that in 3 days he planned to parade the young woman at the most important social event of the year as his new strategic partner, while Sarah was expected to stay home, quietly feigning ignorance. He didn't know it yet, but Sarah had also decided to attend that gala. And when she walked into that ballroom, nothing would ever be the same. The golden cage of Manhattan, the morning sun of Manhattan, streamed through the silk curtains of the Vance family penthouse, casting a golden light that danced across the Italian marble of the entrance foyer. At 32, Sarah possessed a kind of timeless, head-turning beauty. Rich chestnut hair that fell in soft waves over her shoulders, emerald green eyes that shone with an almost hypnotic intensity, and a smile that, even when forced, could illuminate any room. She was meticulously arranging fresh lilies in a crystal vase, a ritual that had become her silent way of finding peace amidst the escalating turmoil of her life. "Mommy, can I help?" The sweet voice of Lily echoed down the hall, and Sarah felt her heart warm instantly. Her 5-year-old daughter was her greatest joy, a smaller version of herself, with the same expressive green eyes and a natural sweetness that seemed to radiate from within. "Of course, my princess." Sarah smiled genuinely for the first time that morning, crouching down to her daughter's level. "How about you help me choose which flowers look best here?" Lily nodded excitedly, her blonde curls bouncing as she carefully examined each bloom. It was in these moments that Sarah found the strength to continue, to maintain the facade of a perfect marriage that had long ago morphed into a gilded cage. The sound of quick, heavy steps on the marble staircase announced the arrival of Alexander. At 38, he was unquestionably an imposing man. Tall, broad-shouldered, flawlessly filling out his bespoke Savile Row suits, black hair always immaculately styled, and that confident smirk that had won not only Sarah's heart years ago, but also the respect of the New York business elite. Alexander Vance was the CEO of Vance & Associates, one of the largest business consultancies in North America. His meteoric rise in the corporate world was legendary. But with success came a transformation that Sarah had watched with increasing sorrow. The kind, attentive man she fell for had given way to someone cold, calculated, and, worst of all, disrespectful. "Morning," Alexander muttered distractedly, barely glancing at his wife and daughter as he checked his phone obsessively. His messages seemed infinitely more interesting than the family he had promised to love and protect. "Daddy!" Lily ran toward him, her small arms outstretched for a hug, which Alexander returned mechanically. His eyes never left the device screen. "Hello, sweetie. Daddy's busy right now," he said, his voice carrying that thinly veiled impatience that had become his trademark at home. Sarah watched the scene with a heavy heart, seeing the bright light in Lily's eyes dim a little. It was always this way. Alexander treated his own family like a social obligation, something to tolerate between crucial meetings and business engagements. Alexander. Sarah tried to capture his attention, her voice soft but determined. It's Saturday. I thought we could spend the day together. Maybe take Lily to Central Park or… Impossible. He cut her off without looking up. I need to review the presentation for the merger with the Rio de Janeiro hotel group. If we land this contract, we'll expand across all of South America. He finally looked at her, but his gaze was cold, almost condescending. Some things are more important than park outings, Sarah. I expect you to understand that. The words hurt deeply, but Sarah had learned to maintain her composure. Years of marriage to Alexander had taught her that showing pain or frustration only resulted in more coldness, more distance. Of course, she replied, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Lily and I will find something to do. Alexander nodded vaguely, already typing a new message. Sarah couldn't help but notice how quickly his fingers moved across the keyboard, and something about his subtle smirk as he typed made her stomach clench with a suspicion she had been trying to ignore for months. Alexander's phone began to ring, and he answered immediately, his voice adopting that charming, enveloping tone he reserved for people he considered important. "Michaela, my dear," he said, walking toward his office. "Of course we can move our meeting up." Sarah felt the blood freeze in her veins. Michaela. That name had appeared with increasing frequency in Alexander's conversations lately, always described as a promising executive or a talented consultant. But there was something in the way Alexander pronounced the name, a subtle intimacy that sent all the alarms screaming in Sarah's mind. "Mommy, is Daddy going to play with us?" Lily asked, her small voice full of hope. Sarah knelt again, taking her daughter's tiny hands. "Not today, my love. But you know what we're going to do? We're going to have a special day just for us. How about we go to the Met Museum and then get ice cream at that shop you love so much?" Lily's eyes lit up again, and Sarah was grateful to have such a resilient daughter, so capable of finding joy even when disappointed. The growing storm. As they prepared to go out, Sarah couldn't help but hear fragments of Alexander's phone conversation drifting from the office. Words like "get together," "reservation for two," and "can't wait" reached her, each one a small dagger to her heart. Later, as they walked the sunny streets of the Upper East Side, Lily chattering animatedly about the Egyptian wing she wanted to see at the museum, Sarah allowed herself to reflect on what her life had become. There was a time when she and Alexander were inseparable, when he made her laugh until her stomach hurt, when his eyes shone with admiration every time he looked at her. The change happened slowly. The man who once said she was the most important woman in his life began to treat her like expensive furniture, something beautiful to display at social events, but ultimately ignored in daily life. "Mommy, are you sad?" Lily's innocent question brought her back to the present. "No, darling." Sarah smiled, kissing her daughter's head. "Mommy is just thinking about how lucky she is to have such a special daughter like you." It was partially true. Lily was her light, her reason to keep fighting, to maintain her dignity even when she felt invisible in her own home. But beneath the surface, a storm of emotions was brewing. Pain, anger, confusion, and a growing certainty that her marriage had become a sham. That evening, after tucking Lily into bed, Sarah found herself alone in the living room, idly flipping through a magazine. Alexander still hadn't returned from his meeting, and she couldn't stop thinking about the name Michaela and the way he had pronounced it. The sound of the front door opening made her heart race. Alexander walked in, looking smug, but his smile faded when he saw Sarah waiting. "Still up?" he asked, loosening his tie. "How was your meeting?" Sarah asked, keeping her voice neutral. "Productive," he replied vaguely, pouring himself a scotch at the bar. "The Rio Group is very interested. This could be our definitive entry into the Brazilian market." Sarah nodded, but couldn't help asking, "And Michaela? Was she also involved in the meeting?" Something shifted in Alexander's expression. A flicker of something that might have been guilt or irritation, disappearing so quickly she almost thought she imagined it. "She coordinated the market analysis for the project," he said, his voice slightly tense. "Why do you ask? Just curious?" "Curiosity," Sarah lied. "You talk about her a lot lately." Alexander looked at her with that expression she knew well, as if she were a child asking impertinent questions. "Sarah, you don't understand the complexities of the business world. Michaela is a competent professional, nothing more." He finished his drink in one gulp. "I'm tired. Good night." And with that, he walked upstairs, leaving Sarah alone with her suspicions and her broken heart. That night, lying in bed next to a husband who slept soundly, Sarah stared at the ceiling and wondered when she had become a stranger in her own life. When had she stopped fighting for her marriage and simply started surviving? Across the room, the glowing skyline of Manhattan pulsed, a city full of possibilities and dreams. But within these luxurious walls, Sarah felt more alone than ever, unaware that her life was about to take a completely unexpected turn, and that the strong, decisive woman she once was about to rise from the ashes of her failed marriage. Sarah is clearly being gaslighted. If you were Sarah's best friend, what would be the first step you'd advise her to take? Confrontation or quiet investigation? Comment your advice below, and remember to subscribe to the channel. Part 2 will shock you. The Price of Truth. Part 2. The Receipt of Betrayal. Hit that subscribe button. If you're following Sarah's story, you know she's walking on thin ice. Now, the quiet investigation begins. Have you ever felt that sinking feeling when your suspicions are confirmed? Comment below with your reaction. And give this video a like if you're ready to see Sarah fight back. The fateful receipt. The week continued its usual course in the Vance penthouse. Alexander left earlier and returned later, always with elaborate excuses about market analysis and international expansion strategies that demanded his constant attention. Sarah had become a specialist in interpreting the signals, the phone he carried everywhere, the secret smiles while texting, the different musky scent that sometimes clung to his clothes. It was a rainy Thursday when everything finally changed. Lily was at school for an extracurricular activity, and Sarah decided to use the afternoon to catch up on some household chores. She was organizing Alexander's closet when she found a suit that needed to go to the dry cleaner. As she checked the pockets, a habit developed after years of marriage, her fingers touched something that made her heart stop. A small, folded piece of paper. With slightly trembling hands, she unfolded what was clearly a restaurant receipt. But this wasn't just any restaurant. It was Le Bernardin. In Midtown, one of Manhattan's most exclusive and notoriously romantic establishments. The receipt was for 2 people, including a bottle of vintage champagne and dishes Alexander would never order for a business meeting. What completely broke her, however, was the date. It was 2 days prior, the exact day he claimed he was at the office preparing reports for the Brazilian investors, arriving home after midnight, too exhausted to talk. Sarah sank heavily onto the closet ottoman, the receipt still clutched in her hand, feeling as if the world had tilted on its axis. All the suspicions, all the signals she had tried to rationalize or ignore, suddenly crystallized into one undeniable, painful truth. The sound of her phone ringing brought her back to reality. It was Julian Thorne, no relation, Alexander's senior partner. Ironically, one of the few genuine friends she still had. "Sarah, my dear." His warm, concerned voice came through the line. "How are you holding up?" Julian was everything Alexander had ceased to be. Kind, attentive, a man of solid principles who treated people with genuine respect. At 40, he possessed a natural elegance that didn't depend on expensive clothes. His salt and pepper hair and kind lines around his eyes spoke of a man who lived with purpose and integrity. "Julian, I need to talk to someone. Do you have a few minutes? Sarah hesitated, fighting back the tears. Always, he replied immediately. I'm on my way. The confession and the conspiracy. 40 minutes later, Sarah was in the living room serving Julian coffee, struggling to find the words to articulate the storm of emotions raging in her heart. He watched her with those compassionate brown eyes, patiently waiting for her to find the courage to speak. Julian, she began, her voice barely a whisper. Do you know? Do you know anything about Alexander? Anything I should know? The silence that followed was confirmation enough. She saw the pain reflected in Julian's face, the internal struggle between loyalty to his partner and genuine concern for her. Sarah, he finally said, his voice heavy with sadness. How long have we been friends? Over 10 years, she replied, since before my marriage. Then you know I would never lie to you. Julian leaned forward, his hands clasped. But you also know this is an impossible position for me. Sarah wordlessly showed him the receipt. Julian looked at the paper and closed his eyes, as if bracing for a physical blow. When he opened them again, there was sadness and grim determination. Her name is Michaela Vance, he said, each word strained. She's 27, a marketing consultant. She's been working with us for about 6 months. Sarah felt a punch to her gut. Hearing the confirmation of her worst fears was even more painful than she had imagined. How long has this been going on? She asked, her voice barely audible. I'd say it started about 5 months ago, maybe a little longer. Julian sighed deeply. Sarah, I tried to talk to Alexander several times. I tried to get him to see the madness of what he was doing, what he was risking. His family, his reputation, everything. And what did he say? He called me old-fashioned, said I didn't understand the complexities of modern life. The bitterness in Julian's voice was palpable. He said you were content just being a trophy wife, that Michaela challenged him intellectually. The words sliced through her. Trophy wife? She repeated, tasting the poison on her tongue. He's wrong, Sarah, Julian said vehemently. Completely wrong. You are one of the most intelligent, talented women I know. Sarah walked to the window, looking out at the perfectly manicured park, which she herself had planned and supervised. Everything in her life looked perfectly arranged on the outside, but inside, it was crumbling. 5 months, she murmured. 27 is exactly the age Lily was when Alexander and I got married. The cruel irony of the situation was staggering. While she built a life, created a home, being the perfect wife he seemed to want, Alexander was constructing a parallel lie. Sarah, Julian approached her, his voice gentle but firm. You need to know one more thing. She turned, seeing something in his eyes that made her dread what was coming. There's a black tie event next week, the annual Manhattan Business Association Gala at the Plaza Hotel. Alexander is going to be there. And he hesitated, clearly wrestling with the words. Michaela will be there as his official date. Sarah's world seemed to stop entirely. She leaned against the windowsill, feeling her legs give way. Official date? She repeated. Her voice a choked whisper. He told the specialized press that she is his new strategic partner, that she will be formally introduced to the New York Business Society at this event. Julian clenched his fists, his own anger manifesting. Sarah, forgive me for having to be the one to tell you this, but you deserve to know. And me? She asked, still processing the magnitude of the betrayal. What excuse did he give for my absence? He said you were tending to personal family matters. Julian's words cut like knives. That you prefer to keep your private life out of the business spotlight. Alexander wasn't just having an affair. He was actively replacing her, erasing her existence from his public life. The birth of a warrior. How much longer, Julian? She asked, opening her eyes and looking at him. How much longer do you think he intends to keep up this charade? Honestly, I believe he plans to file for divorce after the Brazilian deal is finalized. Julian sighed. Michaela, She's not just a mistress, Sarah. She's ambitious, calculating. I believe she sees you as a stepping stone to building her own empire. The revelation was the final blow. Sarah sat heavily on the ottoman, processing not just the end of her marriage, but the cruel and public way it was being executed. He's going to leave me with nothing, she murmured, more to herself than to Julian. He's going to paint me as the inadequate wife, the woman who failed to support his professional growth. Not if he doesn't have a choice, Julian said, a new determination emerging in his voice. Sarah, you are not the same vulnerable woman who married Alexander 7 years ago. You've grown, evolved. You've become a silent but powerful force. It's time to prove it. She looked at him, confused. What do you mean? You go to the gala. Julian, I can't. You can. And you will. He interrupted gently but firmly. Not as the humiliated wife hiding at home, but as the strong, elegant woman you are. Let Alexander and his mistress know you won't disappear quietly. And how do you suggest I do that? Sarah's voice carried a tone of desperation. I don't even have an invitation. Julian smiled for the first time since he arrived. You go as my date. I'm a senior partner. I have the right to bring anyone I choose. He paused significantly, and I have some illuminating information regarding Alexander's questionable business practices that might be useful. Julian, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. He stood up and walked toward her. Sarah, Alexander isn't just betraying you. He's betraying the ethical principles of our firm. There are irregular contracts, undeclared commissions, a series of activities that could destroy our reputation if they came to light. Are you talking about blackmail? I'm talking about justice, Julian corrected, and protecting you and Lily from what's to come. That night, after Julian left, Sarah found herself in Lily's room, watching her daughter sleep peacefully. The innocence on the child's face stood in brutal contrast to the storm raging in her mother's heart. Mommy is going to fight for us, my princess, she whispered, kissing her daughter's forehead gently. I won't let him treat us like we're disposable. When Alexander came home that night, later than ever, with Michaela's scent still clinging to him, he found Sarah waiting in the living room. But there was something different about her, something he couldn't immediately place. Still up? He asked. As usual. Alexander, she said, her voice surprisingly calm and controlled. We need to talk. He looked at her suspiciously, noting the change in her posture, the way she held her shoulders straight, her chin high. About what? About the gala next week. Sarah rose gracefully, walking toward him. I hear you're bringing a special date. Alexander's face paled slightly, but he quickly composed himself. Sarah, I can explain. You don't need to. She interrupted him, her voice maintaining that unsettling calmness. In fact, I think it's going to be a very revealing night for everyone involved. What do you mean by that? Sarah smiled. Not the forced, submissive smile he knew, but something new. Something that carried a dangerous promise. You'll know in due time, Alexander. Good night. And with that, she walked upstairs, leaving him alone with his lies, and a growing sense that he had severely underestimated the woman he had married. Sarah is going to the gala with Julian. This is going to be epic. What color dress should Sarah wear to completely steal the spotlight and symbolize her power? Emerald green, her eyes, or blood red? Danger. Vote in the comments, and subscribe so you don't miss the ultimate showdown in Part 3, The Price of Truth. Part 3, The Emerald Strike. This is the moment of truth. If you've been waiting for Sarah's glorious comeback, hit that like button right now. We're about to witness the ultimate power play. Subscribe to our channel, because you won't want to miss the fallout. The metamorphosis. The days leading up to the gala were a whirlwind of preparation and transformation for Sarah. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to spend money on herself. Not just the quick, practical purchases she had grown accustomed to, but a real investment in her own image and confidence. On Monday morning, while Alexander rushed out for another of his important meetings, Sarah called Isabella Vega, an old college friend who had become one of Manhattan's most sought-after stylists. "Sarah Vance?" Isabella's voice, full of genuine surprise and delight, rang through the line. "It's been ages! How's high society life treating you?" "Complicated," Sarah answered honestly. "Isabella, I need your help. I need a dress for the Business Association Gala, and I need to look unforgettable." There was a pause on the other end, and Sarah could almost hear Isabella's creative mind whirring. "What kind of unforgettable are we talking about here, darling? The traffic-stopping kind, or the relationship-destroying kind?" "The second one," Sarah said without hesitation. "Perfect," Isabella chuckled. "I'll be at your penthouse in an hour, with some options that will make you feel like the goddess you always were." The next 3 hours were a transformative experience. Isabella had brought 5 gowns, each more dazzling than the last. But it was the 5th dress that made Sarah stop breathing. It was a deep emerald green, the exact color of her eyes, with a cut that combined sophistication and subtle seduction. The fabric flowed like water over her body, accentuating her silhouette without being vulgar, and the structured back was a work of art. "This one," she said simply, looking in the mirror and seeing not the neglected wife she had become, but the powerful woman who had always been beneath the layers of submission and self-doubt. "I knew you'd choose it," Isabella smiled with satisfaction. "It's the hardest to wear. It demands absolute confidence. But on you, it will be devastating." They spent the rest of the afternoon choosing shoes, jewelry, and discussing hairstyle options. Isabella insisted on scheduling Sarah with her own beauty team, people who worked with international celebrities. "Sarah," Isabella asked, while they were sorting the details, "can I ask what's really happening? You look like a woman on a mission." Sarah decided on honesty. "My husband has been having an affair for 5 months. He's taking the mistress to the gala as his official business partner, while I'm supposed to stay home like an obedient wife, pretending I don't know." Isabella's eyes narrowed dangerously. "What kind of man does that to a woman like you? The kind who forgot he married a woman, not a decorative accessory." Sarah's voice carried a cold determination. "He's going to be reminded, in a very public and very memorable way." "Good. Then we'll make sure you are absolutely unforgettable." The gathering storm. Meanwhile, at Vance & Associates, Alexander was having his own tense web of conversations. Julian had requested a private meeting, and Alexander could feel his partner's disapproval radiating from him. "Alexander, we need to talk about Michaela," Julian said, closing the office door. "Julian, we've discussed this. She is a competent professional, and she is collecting unauthorized commissions from the Brazilian clients," Julian interrupted. "I found discrepancies in the contracts she drafted, commissions going directly into her personal account. We're talking about over $200,000 in irregular commissions." Alexander felt his blood run cold. "What are you talking about?" "You're being used, Alexander," Julian said, his voice heavy with pity. "Michaela isn't interested in you. She's interested in your position, your access to clients, your signature on contracts. You're exaggerating because you never liked her." "I'm trying to save our firm and your reputation," Julian retorted. "And by the way, maybe save your marriage too." "What do you want me to do?" Alexander finally asked, his voice defeated. "Break up with her, publicly. At the gala, make it clear there was a misunderstanding about her status at the firm. Go home to your wife and try to salvage what little can still be saved." Julian sighed deeply. "If you don't, I'll be forced to present this evidence to the association's board of directors. Our business reputation is at stake." That evening, Alexander came home earlier than usual, finding Sarah in the living room, reading a book. There was a serenity about her he hadn't seen in years, as if she had made a momentous decision. "Sarah," he began, sitting next to her on the sofa. "Can we talk?" She marked the page of her book and looked at him, her green eyes calm but alert. "Sure. About the gala?" He hesitated, searching for the right words. "Perhaps you should come with me after all, as my wife." Sarah studied him for a long moment. "Alexander, is there anything you'd like to tell me? About Michaela? About what's really going on between you?" Alexander felt his heart pound. How much did she know? "You don't need to explain now," she said, rising gracefully. "As you said, some revelations are best made at the appropriate time. I'll see you at the gala, Alexander. It's going to be a very interesting night." And for the second time that week, she left him alone with his lies, and a growing sense that he had completely lost control of the situation. The Emerald Strike, the Plaza Hotel, was resplendent that October night. The annual Manhattan Business Association Gala was always the most prestigious event of the social and business calendar, drawing the corporate elite. Alexander arrived at 8 o'clock, impeccably dressed in a bespoke tux, with Michaela on his arm. She wore a shimmering gold dress, her blonde hair perfectly styled. At 27, Michaela Duran possessed a calculated beauty. Every gesture, every smile, seemed planned for maximum impact. They were immediately surrounded by other executives. Alexander introduced Michaela with his rehearsed speech about her professional competence and strategic vision, but he couldn't miss the speculative glances exchanged behind his back. Everyone knew Alexander was married. "And your wife, Alexander?" asked a senior board member. "It's been a while since we saw her at public events." Alexander felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "Sarah prefers to tend to family matters. You know how she is." Across the room, near the main entrance, Julian checked his watch for the 10th time. It was 8:40 p.m., and Sarah still hadn't arrived. Then, the conversations in the room gradually began to quiet, like ripples spreading across a lake. Heads turned toward the entrance, whispers circulated, and even the orchestra seemed to play softer, as if instinctively recognizing that something extraordinary was about to happen. Serafina Vance had arrived. She appeared at the top of the grand marble staircase descending to the ballroom, and for a moment that stretched into eternity, time simply stopped. The emerald green gown flowed around her body like liquid water, catching and reflecting the chandelier lights in an almost magical way. Her posture was that of a queen, shoulders straight, chin held high, and those green eyes, which had always been her trademark, now glowed with an intensity that seemed to illuminate the entire room. She descended the steps slowly, every movement calculated for maximum impact. The silence in the room was deafening. 200 people, CEOs, politicians, socialites, all stopped what they were doing to stare at this dazzling woman who had appeared like a vision. Alexander, who was in the center of the room, felt a shiver run down his spine before he turned around. When he finally saw her, his face paled visibly. This was not the submissive, neglected Sarah he had left at home for months. This was a completely transformed woman, a force of nature in human form, and she was walking directly toward him. "Alexander," she said, her voice soft but charged with an authority that silenced everyone. "What a surprise to find you here." She turned to Michaela, studying her with a look that was both assessing and utterly impassive. "And you must be Michaela Duran. I've heard so much about you. International expansion. Alexander always had such a passion for new territories." The thinly veiled insinuation was lost on no one. "Sarah." Alexander finally found his voice, though it came out hoarse. "What are you doing here?" She smiled then, not the submissive, conciliatory smile he knew, but something new, something that carried a dangerous promise. "I'm here as Julian's date, naturally. You don't mind, do you? After all, I'm still part of the Vance family." Julian appeared at her side, offering his arm chivalrously. It was the protective way he positioned himself next to Sarah that sent a cold spike of something that might have been jealousy through Alexander. "Good evening, Alexander," Julian said, his voice maintaining professional cordiality, but his eyes carrying a coldness Alexander had never seen. "It's comforting to have true friends, don't you think?" Sarah said, before Julian could speak. "People you can completely trust." The word trust dropped like a bomb amidst the conversation. Alexander felt the blood drain from his face, and Michaela instinctively moved closer to him, seeking protection. The orchestra began to play a classic waltz, and the room gradually resumed its activities, though many eyes were still focused on the drama unfolding at the center of the ballroom. "Sarah," Julian extended his hand, "would you care to dance?" "I would love to," she replied, accepting his hand without even glancing at Alexander. As they glided onto the dance floor, Alexander stood transfixed, watching his wife. A wife he suddenly realized he may have never truly known, dancing gracefully in his partner's arms. Every move she made was elegant, confident, magnetically attractive. It was impossible not to look at her, impossible not to be drawn in by her transformed presence. "Are you okay, darling?" Michaela whispered nervously. "Perhaps we should leave." But Alexander couldn't move. He was completely mesmerized by the woman on the dance floor, a woman he had taken for granted for years, a woman who was now showing him and everyone present exactly what he had lost. And the night was just beginning. Sarah has successfully staged her dramatic entrance, but the confrontation is yet to come. What information should Sarah use first to hit Alexander where it hurts the most? His ego, by revealing his trophy wife comment, or his business, by threatening to expose Michaela's fraud? Vote now in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and like. Part 4 will be the final, devastating confrontation. The Price of Truth. Part 4. Dignity or destruction. This is the final showdown. If you've been with Sarah since the beginning, your support is needed now more than ever. Hit that like button and subscribe for the powerful conclusion. We want to know, did Alexander truly love Michaela, or was she just a tool for his ego? Share your thoughts in the comments. The whispers and the withdrawal. The waltz came to an end, but Sarah and Julian remained on the dance floor for a few extra beats, talking in whispers that seemed both intimate and conspiratorial. Alexander watched every gesture, every smile, every moment of closeness between them, with an intensity that bordered on obsession. "Are you all right?" Julian asked in a low voice, his hand still gently placed on her waist. "Better than I've been in years," Sarah replied, and for the first time in months, she meant it. "Thank you for giving me the courage to be here." "The courage was always there, Sarah. You just let it sleep for a while." When they returned to the social area, they found Alexander standing alone. Michaela had vanished, likely to the restroom, trying to compose herself and plan her next move. "Alexander!" Sarah approached him with that same unsettling calmness. "Can we speak privately?" Alexander nodded, unable to refuse. There was something about her presence that completely magnetized him. They moved to one of the hotel's side terraces, a more reserved space overlooking the illuminated gardens of Manhattan. Once they were alone, the veneer of social cordiality finally began to crack. "What are you doing, Sarah?" Alexander demanded, his voice filled with frustration and confusion. "Appearing here with Julian, publicly embarrassing me." "Embarrassing you?" Sarah interjected, her emerald eyes flashing dangerously. "Alexander, you brought your mistress to a public event and introduced her as your partner. Who was embarrassing whom?" Alexander paled. "How do you know?" "Oh, I know." Sarah took a step closer, and Alexander could smell her perfume. Something new, more intense, more confident. "I know about Le Bernardin. I know about the 5 months of lies. I know about the plans to publicly discard me while elevating Michaela to the status of your new companion." Sarah, can I explain? You don't need to, she said, surprisingly calm. In fact, I should thank you. Thank me? Alexander was completely lost. Yes. You did me a great favor by showing me who you truly are. Imagine if I had discovered this 10 years from now, after wasting even more of my life trying to be the perfect wife for a man who didn't deserve a single day of my dedication. The words cut Alexander deeper than he ever imagined words could hurt. Because somewhere, deep down, he knew she was right. And Lily? He asked, trying to regain some control. Lily is going to be fine, Sarah replied. She has a mother who loves her unconditionally and who will fight for her. As for the father, she paused significantly. Well, that will depend on your decisions from now on. What do you mean? I mean, you have two options, Alexander. You can do this civilly. Divide our assets fairly, establish a custody agreement that prioritizes Lily's well-being, and maintain a minimum of dignity in the process. Sarah's voice dropped, becoming razor-sharp. Or, Julian can decide to share some interesting information with the association's board of directors about certain financial irregularities involving the Brazilian contracts. Alexander felt punched in the stomach. You wouldn't do that, wouldn't I? Sarah's eyes narrowed. Alexander, you spent the last 5 months lying to me, betraying me, humiliating me, and planning to discard me like old furniture. What makes you think you still deserve my protection? The unmasking of the mistress. At that moment, Michaela appeared at the entrance of the terrace, clearly having searched for Alexander. She had reapplied her makeup and composed her posture, but there was a visible tension in her shoulders. Alexander, darling, she said, trying to sound casual. People are looking for you. There are some investors who would like to… Michaela? Sarah turned to her with a smile that was pure elegance and pure venom. How good that you're here. I was just talking to Alexander about decisions and consequences. Michaela glanced nervously between Alexander and Sarah. You know, Sarah continued, walking slowly around Michaela. I heard you're very talented at expanding territories. Julian told me some fascinating things about your creativity with international contracts. Michaela's face lost color instantly. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm sure you don't, Sarah said softly. But I'm sure the IRS would be very interested to know more about those creative commissions that appeared in private accounts. Alexander! Michaela turned to him, panic beginning to rise in her voice. What is she talking about? Alexander looked between the two women, his wife, transformed into an unstoppable force, and his mistress, suddenly looking very young and very vulnerable. For the first time in months, he saw the situation clearly. Michaela was not the sophisticated woman he thought. She was an opportunist who saw him as an opportunity for social and financial ascent. And Sarah was everything he had forgotten she could be. Intelligent, strong, magnificent. Michaela, he finally said, his voice tired. I think you should leave. What? She looked at him as if he had lost his mind. Alexander, you can't be serious. After everything we… After what? Sarah gently interrupted. After you used my family to advance your career? After you stole from the firm my husband built? After you tried to destroy a marriage for your own benefit? I love Alexander, Michaela exploded, finally showing real emotion. No, Sarah said with unshakable certainty. You love what Alexander represents. The power, the money, the status. But as for Alexander, the man, I doubt you even know him. Michaela looked at Alexander, waiting for him to defend her, to deny the accusations. But he remained silent. And in that silence, she saw the truth. You'll regret this, she finally said, her mask of sophistication completely falling away. You both will regret this. Perhaps, Sarah said calmly, but at least we will regret it with dignity. Michaela left the terrace with quick, furious steps, leaving Alexander and Sarah alone again. The final decision. The silence stretched between them, heavy with 7 years of marriage, months of betrayal, and the inevitable reality of what was to come. "And now what?" Alexander finally asked. "Now you choose," Sarah replied. "Dignity or destruction, cooperation or war, respect or public humiliation." Alexander looked at the woman in front of him, his wife, the mother of his daughter, the woman he had sworn to love and protect. He saw not only what he had lost, but what he had never truly appreciated. "Sarah," he said, his voice slightly breaking. "Not now, Alexander," she interrupted softly. "Some words lose their power when they are said too late. You made your decision 5 months ago. Now I am making mine." She turned to leave, but stopped at the entrance to the terrace. "Oh, and Alexander, the next time you choose a woman, make sure she loves you for the man you are, not for what you own. You deserve that, and so does she." And with those words, Serafina Vance left the terrace and Alexander's life forever, leaving him alone with his choices and his consequences. Final call to action. The price of the truth, what an ending. Sarah not only regained her dignity, but also secured her future by demanding justice and cooperation. Do you think Sarah made the right decision? Or would you have offered Alexander a chance at reconciliation for Lily's sake? Share your final thoughts on The Price of Truth in the comments. And make sure to subscribe to our channel for more stories of justice and empowerment.